Hare Krishna, good evening. A trip to Lowe's that got too long. As a result, I'm going to be saying Krishna Book, talking about the story of Krishna, chapter 9, entitled Mother Yashoda Binds Lord Krishna. So we heard last chapter how Krishna could be quite a naughty boy. Both Krishna and Balaram would get on their hands and knees now, and they were able to. Are you driving? They were able to. Are you driving, Kuti? Oh, ID. I thought you said key. Okay, 1 second, everybody. Here we go. So, on their hands and knees. Sorry about the trouble. They got up to quite a bit of muddy nonsense, grabbing the tails of calves, and then the calves would run because their tails were being pulled, and they'd drag Krishna and Balaram throughout the courtyard and the mud, and they had fun like that. They also would frequently steal butter and milk and yogurt from the neighbors, and then feed the monkeys the butter and milk. And then when basically when they were full, then they would feed it the monkeys. And then when the monkeys became full, they'd tell the neighboring gopis that, look, your milk isn't good. Look, the monkeys won't even have it. That's how poor quality your milk is. And then when the gopis would come and try and complain to Mother Yashoda, and Krishna and Balaram were there, they were just acting like angels, like they never did anything wrong. And when really they were up to quite a bit of nonsense. So yeah, that was chapter 8. Now in this chapter, Mother Yashoda, once upon a time, seeing that her maidservant was engaged in something, other activities, household activities, Mother Yashoda took it on herself to start churning butter. And churning butter, she was singing of Lord Krishna's pastimes and enjoying, thinking of Krishna, thinking of her son. She had the end of the sari nicely, tightly wrapped, and because for her son she was churning milk, she would get the best of the milk, from the best of their cows. You know how many cows they had? They had a huge amount of cows, and then they picked the best of those cows and put them in the best pastures, and the best of those, they milked those cows, and then of that they churned it into yogurt, and then turned it into butter. And so she was doing that herself, and she was actually breaking a sweat. And the flower garland she wore on her head was scattered here and there, and it was a beautiful sight. And at that point Krishna appeared, and he was hungry, and Prabhupada says he was increasing the love for his mother, and also increasing his mother's love for him by requesting her to feed him. And then she then stopped her churning of butter. He wanted her to stop, and she did. He wanted her to know that her first duty was taking care of him. And then Mother Yashoda, took her son on her lap, and then, allowed Krishna, pushed her nipple of her breast into his mouth, and Krishna was then able to suck and was smiling, and she was enjoying the beauty of his beautiful, cute face. And now, while she was churning butter, she had also put milk to boil on the stove, and now she realized that the stove began to boil over. The milk on the stove began to boil over. And then she immediately, to stop the milk from spilling, she immediately got up, put Krishna down, and got up to fix that. Oh, that got Krishna angry. His eyes turned red and his lips were in rage. He pressed his teeth and lips, and taking up a piece of stone, he threw it against the pot that Yashoda was breaking. Breaking the pot that Yashoda was using to churn, to make butter. And then, with false tears in his eyes, crocodile tears, he began to eat the butter in a secluded place. Meantime, Yashoda, returning, saw the, from having put down the overflowing pan of milk to this broken pot of yogurt, and she went on to find where Krishna was, and she was smiling, and she thought, this child is clever. He's left this place fearing punishment. And so she took up a stick. She had then, seeking where he went is not very difficult, because Krishna, he had little feet stepped into that yogurt, and those little feet left little marks of where he was going. And in that secluded place, he was hiding behind a big wooden grinding mortar, which was kept upside down, and taking butter from a pot which was hanging from the ceiling. And then at that point he was climbing onto that wooden grinding mortar after having eaten the milk and butter, and then feeding it to the monkeys. And Krishna was looking in all directions when feeding to the monkeys. So this was in the courtyard. He had left the home, and there was feeding to the monkeys and looking here and there, in fear, because he was conscious that he was being naughty. And after seeing her son so engaged, she silently approached from him behind with a stick in her hand, and he immediately got down of the grinding mortar and began to run in fear. Mother Yashoda chased him to all corners, trying to capture the Supreme Personality of Godhead, little Krishna running around. Who the big yogis, the meditators, the tapasvis, or those performing lots of austerities in order to see Lord Krishna, who try to attain him. And Mother Yashoda was similarly trying to attain Krishna by running behind him with a stick. He was quite a fast running child, and she was, she had trouble keeping up. Her hair loosened, the flowers in her hair fell to the ground. And although she was getting tired, she somehow reached naughty Krishna and caught a hold of him. And Krishna at that point was at the point of crying. And he was smearing with his hands over his eyes. He had this ointment, and he was smearing the black eye cosmetics all over his face. And then Mother Yashoda, seeing Krishna's face, restless in fear, and Mother Yashoda understood, this is, she was a bit worried, like, maybe it's too much fear I'm instilling in him, and that may not be good. So she didn't know what would happen, so she threw away the stick. But in order to punish him, she decided to bind him. She wanted to bind his hands with a rope, and she wanted to bind him to the wooden grinding mortar. But, capturing the Lord is impossible for some, and what to speak of binding him. And she didn't know that this child had no limitations. There is no beginning or end to him. He is the source of everything there is, and like we'd heard before, the whole entire creation is found within his mouth. Anyways, she went out to find some rope, and it was just too tight, just 2 inches too short. And then gathered more rope from the house and added to it, and still she found the same shortage. to tie Krishna to the wooden grinding mortar. And in this way, she used up all the ropes available at the home. And then, when the final knot was done, it was still 2 inches too short. Mother Yashoda was smiling and was astonished, and how was this happening? Her attempt to bind her son continuously was getting her tired, and she was perspiring. And yeah, Lord Krishna appreciated the hard labor of his mother, and becoming compassionate upon her, he agreed to be bound up by the ropes. Krishna, playing as a human child in the house of Mother Yashoda, was performing his own select pastimes. Of course, no one can control the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The pure devotees surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Lord, who may either protect or vanquish the devotee. But for his part, the devotee never forgets his own position of surrender. Similarly, the Lord also feels transcendental pleasure by submitting himself to the protection of a devotee. So Mother Yashoda was obviously concerned about Krishna's, education and training. She didn't want him to be spoiled, turn into somebody spoiled. So she decided she needed to punish him as well. But at the same time, Krishna had her, go for a bit of a run there. And then finally, when she did her utmost best and Krishna was feeling compassion for her now, he allowed her to tie her. And he's so hard to achieve for some, but so easy for his devotees, so that's one of the other things that can be taken from this story. Now, after binding her son, Mother Yashoda again began to engage herself in household affairs. At that time, Krishna, bound up to the wooden mortar, saw a pair of trees before him, which were known as Arjuna trees. These Arjuna trees, they're known to be very old, these 2 trees, and they're specifically famous for having very deep grounded roots. When a storm comes, when a tornado comes, all other trees may collapse, but the trees that don't collapse are the Arjuna trees. So just near where Krishna was bound up onto the wooden grinding mortar, there was those 2 trees very close next to each other, and huge old trees. Now, the great reservoir of pleasure, Lord Krishna just thought to himself, Mother Yashoda first of all left without feeding me sufficient milk. Therefore I broke the pot of yogurt. That's what Krishna was thinking. And distributed the stock of butter in charity to the monkeys. Now she has bound me up to a wooden mortar, so I shall do something even more mischievous than before. And thus he thought of pulling down the 2 very tall Arjuna trees. So there's a whole history behind those 2 particular trees. And in their previous lives, the trees were born as human sons of Kuvera, and their names were Nalakuvera and Manigriva. Fortunately, they came within the vision of the Lord. In their previous lives, they were cursed by the great sage Narada. Remember Narada, who was telling on Kamsa to speed things up. So they received the benediction in order to be able to see Lord Krishna. And so the benediction curse was bestowed upon them because of their forgetfulness due to intoxication. So this story will be narrated in the next chapter. So today was a bit short, but it was fun. Mother Yashoda, she binds Lord Krishna, one of the favorites of the devotees, and these 2 fingers, they indicate endeavor and mercy. So Mother Yashoda had to put endeavor, and the other finger is mercy. So whenever we need to pray like it's up to God, and we need to act and serve Krishna like it's up to us. So thank you for listening, and good night. Think of Krishna. Hare Krishna. Good night.